Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning for the public consultation session on the proposals for the new Filmhouse. I'm Susie Gray, I'm part of the Filmhouse team that's working on engagement around the new proposals. We'd obviously hope to meet you in person in the current building and to show you the 3D model and talk to you, answer your questions, but unfortunately we can't do that. So thank you for coming on this journey and discovering this new online entertainment. So we really appreciate the time that you're taking to engage with this. I hope you've had time to look at all the information that's available on the website. There's a lot of plans and videos and text there to read. We've scheduled this session to last an hour, and there's one last session this afternoon at 4 p.m. We had a couple yesterday too. We're streaming live onto YouTube at the moment, and we're also recording the session so that if you do have to pop away for any reason, then you can watch it later. We'll make it available online. If you require captioning, this morning we don't have a captioner. That will be back with us this afternoon. But if you go onto the live YouTube video, you can click on the open captions, open transcript, it's called, option, and receive them that way. So as we go through the session, we'll ask one or two questions too, just to give us a sense of who has joined us this morning and what you already know about the project. So let's have a go at one of those polls now. So the first one is, how often do you attend the Filmhouse? So click on the most appropriate answer. Is it once a month, more than once a month even, every 6 months, once a year, every 2 years, or have you never seen a film at the Filmhouse? Okay, this answer is coming in. Any more to join? Yeah, that's us about there. Okay. So we can see that 60% of you come more than once a month. That's brilliant. So real regulars, which is great to see. And a further 20% once a month. So thank you for filling that in. We'll do one or two of those as we go along. We've got 3 panelists here this morning to talk to you about the project from different perspectives. The first is going to be Ken Hay. He's the Chief Executive of the Centre for the Moving Image, which incorporates Filmhouse, the Edinburgh International Film Festival and Belmont Aberdeen. We've got Richard Murphy, the award-winning architect, whose plans and designs for the building I hope you've had a chance to look at online on the Filmhouse website. And Fraser Littlejohn, who's a planning partner at Montague Evans, who are the property consultants on this project. Their short presentations will take around 15 minutes in total, and then we'll take questions from you. As I say, we've allowed an hour, so there should be a good amount of time to answer your questions. There's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, so if you click on that, you can type your question in, and I'll see it at this end and put it to the panel. We've also received quite a few questions for this morning's session in advance, so we'll go through those too. Okay, so Ken, I think it's over to you to kick us off.
Thanks very much, Susie. I'm just going to get a very short presentation up onto the screen for everyone. Hope you can see that. That's the proposal that we have put forward for consultation. We're just, I think, the thing to emphasize at the beginning, this is a work in progress. We have spent a lot of time getting to this point, but the whole reason that we're having a consultation process at this time is to get your input and feedback onto what you think about not just the design, but the vision that we've got for the new building. The first question I've been asked many, many times is, why do you need a new building? Why can't you just do up the existing Filmhouse? And I suppose that there are 2 key things. First of all, the existing Filmhouse is actually 4 separate buildings. It's a real guddle. It's very awkward to navigate. It's a listed building, so we're actually really constrained in what we can do in terms of adapting the space. And all the ways that we could adapt the space to make it more comfortable and to provide a better customer experience, all it does is actually reduce the capacity in each of the screens, in the cafe bar and in the offices. So we have a slightly perverse situation that in trying to improve the quality of the experience for people actually makes it less possible for us to do what we want to do. And that leads into the second thing, is actually we want to do more of what we do. We've been bursting at the seams for many, many years. Filmhouse has been on that site for just over 40 years. Each year we show about 700 feature film programs But we also host a range of other smaller film festivals, Take One Action, Scotland's Anime, Africa in Motion, and so on, as well as hosting Edinburgh International Film Festival. We are a charity, and we are committed to ensuring that film is part of everyone's lives. Our vision is to transform people's lives through film. Yes, through the watching, but also through the making and through the learning and understanding of film. And within the existing Filmhouse, we can do some of that. And what we're proposing with the new Filmhouse is we can do all of that in the one space. And what we're trying to achieve is creating a community of film, where yes, you've got the people who are wanting to watch the films, but coming together with the people who are making the films, curating the films and film festivals, learning about and teaching about films. And it means that wherever you are in the building, you know that you'll have some kind of connection to film and the broader screen sector. When we're producing the brief, we came up with 4 key design principles that we passed on to Richard and his team. First of all, a very simple one. We have to have a building that works for us, but crucially all the partners that we host, but also works for all the audiences who come in to the building. Our existing building is hugely constrained in what it can do, really awkward to get around. This building will allow us to do an awful lot more. We go from 3 screens to 6 screens. We have more seats. We have more eating and drinking space, more space for people to congregate and to learn about and talk about film. But crucially from our side, it also allows us to operate sustainably. We're in a position at the moment where it's become more and more expensive to operate the existing Filmhouse building. We can't do anything else with it. As I say, the only thing we could do is potentially reduce our ability to generate revenue. And what this building will allow us to do is create a sustainable business for the years to come. Secondly, and it's sort of tied together with what I've just said, is the building must be fully accessible, not just for customers and audiences, but for staff and everyone else who is using the building at different times. And accessible is twofold. It's the physical accessibility, so how do people actually get through and around the building, so that all levels within the building will be fully accessible, including Richard and I have been to see a number of cinemas around the world, including quite new ones. And for example, projection boxes are always up a flight of stairs. Here, the projection boxes will be available. So if you're a projectionist who happens to have a mobility issue, you can get there. But likewise for customers, all levels will be fully accessible. But it's also the emotional accessibility. And this is something, again, I've been asked about. The beauty of Filmhouse is it's a very welcoming organisation. We don't want you to lose that ethos. But in parallel, you've got a really austere facade at the moment. So the facade of Filmhouse is a Georgian church. It's sort of supposed to imbue godliness within you and a sort of sense of fear of God. It's a very hard threshold to get beyond unless you know what's behind it. What we're trying to do here is create a building that is fully accessible emotionally as well as physically. Thirdly, although climate emergency has sort of taken a bit of a back seat in the last 3 or 4 months because of COVID-19, it is still possibly the biggest issue that we as a planet have got to deal with in the coming years. And we want to play our part in how we can address that. And so as we're looking at the design, how we can make the building as friendly to the environment as possible and as close to operating on a carbon neutral basis. And that means that we'll have photovoltaic cells on glazing. It means that we'll be having air sourced heat pumps. It also means that we'll only be using electricity sourced from verifiably renewable energy sources. And then lastly, we're fully aware we're taking up some crucial and sparse public space in Edinburgh city centre. And we want to do 2 things with this. First of all, make sure that the building that is there makes sense for that space. Yes, speaks to the surrounds, but also is part of that notion of this is Edinburgh's cultural quarter. If you think about it, you've got the Lyceum, the Usher Hall and the Traverse sitting cheek by jowl on the other side of the road. This, we feel, will be the catalyst that allows that cultural quarter to actually have a sense of a singular identity. But secondly, it's how the square itself is used. And over many years, we've discussed with the neighbours on the square and other how to make the square work. the BBC big screen was there for a number of years, and I think apart from when Andy Murray and Chris Hoy were winning gold medals, or I think one of the royal weddings, it was a bit busy then. The rest of the time, it's been very odd uses over the years, and very rarely has it actually been utilised as a genuine public space. And what we want to do is use this building as the catalyst that makes Festival Square work for the first time in its 35-year history. And that means we'll be encouraging the use of the square for obviously eating and drinking purposes, but also for art, for installations, for performance, and for things that make people want to be there. Those are the key design principles that are underpinning what we're trying to do here. Hopefully through the conversation over the next hour, we can discuss more of some of the detail. But from my side, it's great that you've joined us for this session. I'm aware it's a very weird session that we're doing it virtually. And as Susie said at the beginning, we'd really like to see you face to face. But without further ado, I'll pass you back to Susie. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ken. So we're going to go to Richard in a moment and hear a bit more about the design for the building. But just before we do that, I'm going to share another quick poll with you. So do you know that the Filmhouse is run by a charity? Let us know if that's something you were already aware of. Okay, we're nearly there in votes. Yep. Okay, I'm just going to end that and share. So actually 80% of you are already aware that the Filmhouse is run by a charity, which is great news. Just 20% not. So still some work for us to do there. Okay. Richard, I'll hand over to you to talk about the design and take us through it. Richard, you're on mute.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. A drawing is going to miraculously appear in front of your eyes any minute now. And there it is. And before I explain the building, I'm sure many of you are already fairly familiar with it. I just want to make a sort of generalized point about what we're trying to do here, and in a way, integrate Edinburgh tradition of building monumental buildings for culture. In cities in Western Europe, you can look at generalized buildings, which are the apartments or the houses and the offices and the shops and things like that. And then there are special buildings, which are historically, they tended to be churches and cathedrals. And then in the 19th century, town halls. And then in Edinburgh's case, of course, the two great railway hotels, and then things like the Bank of Scotland and whatnot. That's a continuing tradition. And in terms of cultural buildings, Edinburgh has done rather well. You know, we've got the two art galleries on the Mound. We've got the Portrait Gallery. We have the Royal Scottish Museum. We have, of course, the Usher Hall. These are all temples to their own art form, but the quintessentially 20th century art form of film doesn't have a building of any prominence whatsoever. In fact, it's actually very anonymous. So we are attempting to rectify that and do it in a contemporary way to make another in this instance, freestanding monument building, and to set it off in its own urban space, which is basically what Festival Square is. So that's a kind of ambitious idea that film can be seen as to be just as important as music across the road, or as painting on the Mound, or whatever have you. So I think that's putting it in its sort of cultural and historical context. Now, to go from one extreme to the other, just to talk you through the various functions of the building as they stack up. That drawing in front of you is a section, and obviously the bottom three floors are much deeper than the rest because they occupy the entire footprint of the square, and what's not shown on that section is the actual meat of the building, which is the 6th auditorium. But having said that, I'll take you from bottom to top. The bottom floor is not really a public floor, it's kitchens and stores and things like that. The next floor up is the cinema concourse, where people mill around before going into a film. Above that is the main cafe bar, which is at -1 level to the street level, but is part of the same space as the street level, which is where you find the box office and another cafe. And then above that, a mezzanine with a further cafe there. So there's a 3-story space there, which welcomes you as you come in, And that is very much about enjoying yourself and eating and drinking and buying tickets and things like that. Above that, there's a special space called the Festival Centre, which, as you can see, is an auditorium at the front and a foyer at the back. And we'll come back to that in a minute. And that's got a big window from which you can see the Usher Hall and the castle. Above that is 2 floors of offices, one of which is for the Filmhouse and Film Festival themselves. And the other one is a mixture of production companies, film festival organizers and educational people. So there's a sort of whole community of people about film in there. The penultimate floor is a rather splendid rooftop restaurant, which we'll show you on the movie. And then finally, at the very top floor is, although it looks like there's a roof on it, that's a retractable roof. It's really an open air bar, and also in the summertime, a film viewing opportunity. So what I'm going to do now is show you a movie. Some of you have already seen the movie on the Filmhouse website. This is a slightly updated and truncated version of it, because, as Ken explained, everything is work in progress at the moment. So, oh, we've suddenly started not at the beginning, but never mind. Here we are in the, can we go back to the beginning, Paul, if that's possible, please? Thanks very much. So there we are going past the castle, and you can see Castle Terrace. And then here we are going on Cambridge Street with obviously the Usher Hall on the left. And the Filmhouse becomes a very prominent object at the end of Cambridge Street, and indeed Grindley Street. Its location in the square is slightly asymmetrical, which sets off the Sheraton Hotel, but it is deliberately aligned on the front door of the Usher Hall. So you literally can come out of one building, go straight across the road and into the other. So we think there's a very strong connection there. The cafe and box office are at this level. You can see this has got a busy space, we think, which will be very exciting. And then you go up a staircase to a mezzanine cafe up above, which can also be used for exhibitions and receptions and things. And there you are going up the staircase and looking across the whole space there and going out to a balcony above the front doors, you'll see in a second. Right opposite the Usher Hall again. So that connection with the Usher Hall, I think, is very obvious, really. Then we're just going back into the front door again, and this time we're going downstairs, and that takes you down to the main bar and restaurant downstairs, which is obviously quite a big space. And if you look carefully, we've just nominally at the moment given all 6 auditorium names from Scottish film history. And as you go towards that, there is a shaft of light, because there's a sort of cleft. So it allows you to see out of the building. It's very important that you don't feel as if you're in a basement. So you can have a connection with light and the city. And you can also see people coming and going at the next floor down into the various auditoria. So there is an idea really about a seamless connection from the outside through the cafe, through the restaurant to the auditorium. And this is the milling about area, the concourse area for those 6 auditoria. And also here we have a large education room, which can be subdivided, because education is a very important and distinctive role that the Filmhouse fulfills. What we're going to do now is go into the largest of the 6 auditorium. They're all different sizes and shapes, as you would expect, and they'll probably all be different interior designs too, which I think is quite interesting. So there we go, and there we have the largest auditorium. You can get the sense of it. Of course, the spacing is much more to do with contemporary standards rather than the one we have in the Filmhouse at the moment, much more generous. And what we're going to do now is go outside again, and you can see there's a curved route here which takes you to the Sheraton Hotel, but the point of that is to show you how transparent the building is, so that you still retain the sense of being in the square, although there is this object building in the center. And we're also using the opportunity to set off the Sheraton Hotel more intelligently, I think, with a terrace at the level of the Sheraton, and also much better steps and disabled access like that. Now we're going to fly up to the Festival Centre, as I mentioned before. This is a special centre for launching festivals, for prestigious events. It might even be for corporate hire. But you can see the most interesting aspect of it is this enormous window, which is acoustically treated, so you don't hear the sound outside, and that can turn into a film screen. So you can go from the experience of looking at Edinburgh and the castle, and then you can go to wherever you are in the film and come back to Edinburgh again. This is the foyer to that centre with its own bar and what have you, but also it can be closed off as a meeting room during the festival itself. So you've got 2 very flexible rooms. the auditorium at the front has collapsible seating. So you can use that also for flat floor events. We've shown a drawing there of it being used for a dinner. And I think that will be quite an exciting opportunity, especially with that amazing view. Now we're going to go to one of the two office floors. They're pretty well identical and obviously not a public floor, but very important all the same. You've got a rather nice boardroom and individual offices around the outside and general office in the middle. The penultimate floor is a restaurant. There are rooftop restaurants in Edinburgh, of course, but this is the most spectacular because it has a 180-degree vista. To the north, you look out obviously towards the New Town and the Firth of Forth and Fife. Straight ahead, you have the castle, and to the right-hand side, you will see the Victorian side of the south side of Edinburgh. So that's going to be a pretty amazing panorama from that height, and there's nothing like that in this part of town at all to date. Now that connects via a rather exciting spiral staircase, which you go up and you find a rooftop bar, which might be open for about 6 months of the year, just like that. And you can see there's a tent there which pulls over it. But also that is a place to watch cinema in the summer. So for example, it would have been like last night, for example, would have been a marvelous opportunity to watch a movie and at the same time have the twinkling lights of Edinburgh underneath you. So we think that could be a very exciting and distinctive feature of the building. And finally, that's it in its context. And I think the movie finishes right at hovering above the Usher Hall. So you can see how the building sits on its square, which itself, of course, is completely re-landscaped and will be under the management of the Filmhouse. So various outdoor events will be choreographed there by them. And that's really, I think, all I have to say.
That's great. Thank you, Richard. Just before I hand over to Fraser, we're going to have another quick poll. So this time we're going to ask you, do you currently think of Lothian Road area as Edinburgh's cultural quarter? So both Ken and Richard have touched on the context of the new Filmhouse in Festival Square. What do you feel about the area currently? That's great. We're nearly complete. Okay. So I will share those results. So 67% already think of it as Edinburgh's cultural quarter, and 33% still feel that it's not fulfilling that role or seen in that way. So I'm going to pass over now to Fraser to talk a bit about the logistics surrounding the project.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you to those attending the presentation today. Montague Evans provide town planning and property advice to CMI Filmhouse and have been working as part of the broader team of consultants as we work to develop the proposals with a view to submitting a planning application to the City of Edinburgh Council towards the end of this summer. I will explain today a little more of the planning context and the planning process associated with the proposed development. Just by way of an introduction, there have been ongoing discussions with the City of Edinburgh Council for a number of months, as well as with other key stakeholders, in relation to the Filmhouse and its future over a number of years. In recent months, there has been significant engagement in relation to the existing site of the Filmhouse and its opportunities and constraints, and also the potential for a new home for the Filmhouse at Festival Square. The Council require ultimately to determine any forthcoming planning application in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan for the site includes the Edinburgh Local Development Plan, an extract of which is shown. Briefly stated, in terms of the development plan, the site is located within the defined city centre. The site is located within West End Conservation Area and adjacent to Edinburgh's World Heritage Site. Festival Square itself, as you can see, forms an area of identified open space. The policies of the development plan are numerous. Briefly stated, the development plan does seek to support a variety of uses in the city centre, including in relation to entertainment and leisure developments. Policy supports comprehensively designed proposals which maximise the potential of the site. Policies of the plan seek to have new development have regard to its setting. From a planning perspective, some of the key points that we've been considering within the team include how the building relates to its surroundings, including in relation to the World Heritage Site, how the building sits in Festival Square and how it can help activate the square, how we can create a sustainable building. The proposals do represent a unique and exciting opportunity for the city. In terms of the planning process so far, as part of the initial stages of consultation, we presented the proposal to Edinburgh Urban Design Panel at the beginning of January. The proposed development is of a size and a scale that is considered to be a major application proposal in the context of the relevant regulations, and the pre-application consultation with which we're currently engaged forms part of that formal process. Accordingly, and in advance of the submission of a formal planning application, we submitted a proposal of application notice to the Council at the beginning of March. The submission of the proposal and application notice included a consultation strategy detailing the nature of the consultation steps to be undertaken before the application is formally submitted as part of the pre-application consultation process. At this stage, comments are to the Filmhouse as prospective applicants. Comments are made to the project team at this stage and will inform the forthcoming planning application submission. A report of pre-application consultation will accompany the planning application and will detail the nature of the various comments received during this period. The report will also detail the project team's response to the various issues raised. There will be an opportunity for you to make comments direct to the City of Edinburgh Council once a planning application is submitted. Details of the consultation strategy even were widely circulated and have appeared across social media platforms in the press, both locally and nationally. As we've heard, and in light of lockdown, Scottish Government advice has been to move on online engagement, which has culminated in the various sessions, including today's online forum. Further on the planning process, pre-application discussions with City of Edinburgh Council and relevant stakeholders continue. Given the nature of the site and the surrounds, being within the conservation area and adjacent to the World Heritage Site, any application will be supported by a suite of information, including an environmental impact assessment. In addition to the environmental impact assessment report, relevant assessments will be submitted, including in relation to planning, design and access, heritage, and sustainability. Just to recap on timescales and going forward, the public consultation period is live until the 12th of July. The intention is to bring forward an application for detailed planning permission by late summer, around about August this year. The application is a major development, which means there is a minimum of a statutory 4-month determination period within which the Council will determine the proposals. The application will likely be presented to a forthcoming meeting of one of the Council's planning committees. Thereafter, and hopefully with a positive recommendation, we would look to begin the fundraising process. It is envisaged that all told, the completion of the project is likely to take up to 5 years. Just to conclude, all comments received at this time are to the Filmhouse project team and are not representations to the City of Edinburgh Council. An opportunity to make representations to the Council will exist when a formal application is made. Finally, we look forward to discussing the proposals with you and continuing to engage with stakeholders in going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Fraser. Thank you all of you for taking us through your perspectives on the project. I hope that's given everyone some further insights into it. Can I remind you that there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if you would like to submit questions, that's the way to do it live to us just now. But we do have quite a few sent in advance, as I mentioned. So let's jump right in with one from Rose Pipes. So her question is, what are the major disadvantages of Filmhouse continuing to operate from its existing premises? I think these need to be considered alongside what you see as the major advantages of spending huge sums on a new building. Could this money be spent in ways that would help to ensure the existing premises are maintained in their present state, but with some refurbishment as needed? Ken, I think that's probably over to you.
It's absolutely across to me. A really good question. In some ways, I started answering it in my presentation earlier. Filmhouse converted Georgian Church, 4 separate buildings all joined together. It is a bit of a rabbit warren. If anyone knows Filmhouse, they know how awkward it is just simply getting from the front of the building on Lothian Road through to, if you're a wheelchair user, to the single wheelchair space that's available in Cinema 2. Because you have to go up a ramp, you have to go along a corridor, you have to then go down a platform lift, along a corridor, up a platform lift, all in effect on a ground floor, just to get you, as I say, to the single wheelchair use. We take pride in that we want to be as inclusive as possible, but so much of the existing building makes it almost impossible for us to be that physically inclusive and accessible as we would want it to be. I think the other aspects of the building that people often say, wouldn't it be good if you could sort out the toilets? And we're fully aware that there are neither enough toilets in the existing building or that they're big enough, the ones that we do have. We've got a confined and constrained footprint. So the only way that we could create bigger toilets and more toilets is eating into either the cafe bar space and or the cinema spaces. So you end up with less space within the spaces you're actually wanting people to be in, and that you can give the experience of watching films or having a cup of coffee or a chickpea curry. And then the final bit is around the comfort of the seating within the cinemas. Again, anyone who knows the cinemas know that they're quite tight, quite narrow, and not enough legroom. There's very easy ways of sorting that out. You re-rake the seats. You put a new angle in on the floor, and you put in a new set of seats. When we've done the analysis of how to make it not even as comfortable as we're proposing in the new building, but just sort of more comfortable, you go from 280 seats in Cinema 1 down to about 170. If you then said, but we want proper toilets, more toilets, bigger toilets at that first floor level into Cinema 1, the only space they can go to is eating into the cinema space. So you end up with even fewer seats in the cinema. And that assumes that it's technically possible to do because you've got the entry doors at that first floor level, but you've then got the emergency exit doors at the rear of the screen, and they're constrained by the original church building. So each time we try and fix one thing, it has this whole series of knock-on impacts. And so where we got to was that we could easily spend a large amount of money on making the existing Filmhouse nicer and much more comfortable, but we would reduce the capacity of the screens by, on average, a third, and within the cafe bar, probably about 35% as well, another third. So all the spaces that people want to come to, we have less of those spaces, but we've got nicer toilets and bigger seats. So the balancing act we had is going, well, that actually makes it less possible for us to develop a sustainable business, and in effect leads us to going, well, we can't afford to do that. We have only one other option, that's the shutdown. Unless, of course, we find a new building that delivers everything that we're looking to achieve.
Thanks, Ken. We've got another one in from Sheena Grant, who's asking, will the top floor of the new building be encased with windows? As if open most of the year, it won't be usable knowing the weather in Edinburgh. Who wants to take that, Richard or Ken? Go on, Richard. Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I can take that. No, it doesn't. It's basically an open terrace, and what we're doing is keeping the rain off. But you're quite right. If it's a very windy day, then you wouldn't use it. But I kind of refuse to subscribe to this idea that we live in a sort of sub-Arctic climate. There's lots of times in Edinburgh where it's very pleasant, and I'm sure it will be used very much. Just as, for example, you know, George Square Gardens is used in the festival. People turn up to the to in all sorts of weathers. So, and we have, as you know, at this time of year, we have most amazing light. So I think it'd be very, very well used indeed.
Thanks, Richard. Ken, do you want to add anything, or will I go on to the next question? Okay. So Arthur Elsie asks, a question regarding the cafe and bar arrangements. Since many have enjoyed its convivial atmosphere and affordability of meals and snacks, can we have an assurance that this will continue to be the aim in the cafe bar provision for the new building? Ken, I think that is
absolutely, yes. One of the challenges we've got with the existing cafe bar is it's too successful. It's a bit like the rest of the building, it's bursting at the seams. And what we've got is a fantastic menu, but it's trying to do everything for everybody. So if you're coming in for the cappuccino, or you're coming in for the soup, or you're coming in for the baked potato, or the nachos, or the chickpea curries, or any of the specials, you're all in the same space at the same time. And we're fully aware that it's a very convivial atmosphere. The seats aren't particularly comfortable, and they're quite crammed in. So what we're proposing here is to increase the amount of cafe bar space, not hugely, but just so that it's much more comfortable for actual cafe bar activity. Secondly, if you go down to the cinema concourse level, again, one of the challenges we have with the existing cafe bar, it acts as a crush bar for the cinemas, as well as being a convivial meeting space and chatting space. And so we're creating a new space that means that the crush bar, if you like, becomes the level below the cafe bar. And then the proposal for the restaurant, it allows us to have the quality food that we do have within the building, but in a dedicated space. And the best example I can think of is actually one of Richard's other buildings that he designed, was Dundee Contemporary Arts, where you've got the cafe bar absolutely is the hub of the building. But, and is also described as the living room of Dundee, it's that sense of it's a communal, convivial space where you know whoever it is, however much of a stranger they are, you know you'll have something to talk about. But right beside it, they've got the restaurant, and you can book the table. You've got the higher quality foods, for want of a better description, there in terms of the chef preparation and presentation. And so you can have more of a restaurant meal, but you can still get your more relaxed cafe bar food and takeaway as well. So absolute commitment that what makes the cafe bar special actually reflects the broader ethos and values of the organization, the whole organization, which is that independence. Independence of spirit, of programming, of food offering, and identity. And what we don't want to lose by going to a new building is any of those things.
Thank you, Ken. I'm going to take a live question next. So Helen Blackburn has asked, do you think the external appearance of the building fits in with the architecture of Edinburgh? I love the inside space, but don't think the outside is aesthetically pleasing. Richard, would you like to respond to that? Or perhaps Ken.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to take that. Obviously, there's a large degree of subjectivity about the opinions about what buildings look like. Where we are here, I mean, there's two things, I think. First of all, we're in Festival Square. We're not in the World Heritage Site. And in that sense, we don't really have much of a context to go against, which is kind of good news, really, because what we want to do is to make a building which is absolutely of the 21st century and is about film, which is, you know, about the 20th century technology. And so we want the building to be part of a progression of architecture in Edinburgh. I mean, we can go right back to medieval times and think how revolutionary it was to move from the old town of Edinburgh to the new town, which was a completely alien form of life, as it were, and then to Victorian architecture, and then to 20th century architecture. So we see a city being something of about the continuity of history, that things change and evolve as societies and technology changes. And cinema is very much about the future, and it's about today's technology, and you would expect to have a building which said just that. And as long as it doesn't affect the enjoyment of the existing World Heritage Site, which it absolutely doesn't, then in a way we're free to do what we like. I think also, you know, there's a conversation here about people take a while to get used to something. Once it becomes part of the familiar view of Edinburgh, then, you know, people don't even think about it. And so, I mean, for example, if I give you a fairly radical and extreme example, I mean, in Paris, of course, they built the Centre Pompidou right in the middle of the historic centre of Paris, a completely alien piece of technology, quite appropriately for what they were trying to do. Now it's part of the scenery, and it's part of things that people go to see, and people don't think twice about it. So I think it's perfectly reasonable and appropriate, in fact, to do an architecture which is absolutely of our own time. And so that's my point of view. But it's, as I say, there's very large degrees of subjectivity about whether you like a building or not. I can't really help you there, I'm afraid.
And if I can just chip in, thank you, Richard. I think I agree with what you're saying. I think the bit to add is that I grew up in Edinburgh. I've watched the whole of the city centre adapt and change over many, many years, including how Lothian Road, which was a pretty grim street for all my childhood, And in particular, what is now Festival Square, which was just old railway sidings, and you had the big advertising boardings and the old carpet showroom, and you had the old garage sitting next door to Filmhouse. That as and when new buildings come, inevitably folk go, oh, that's a bit of a shock. As Richard said, this is a statement. This is us saying that film is important. The challenge of film as an art form is it's always hidden in a dark space. It's really hard to get the message out there that there's something exciting, interesting going on, because by its nature, you're actually wanting no light, no activity, no sign of that going on. And so what we're wanting is to create a space that is visibly about film. The second bit is it's also for the people of Edinburgh. We're trying to, yes, make a statement about film and about its place in the city and about its place in the country, and film as that global art form. But to put it into context, this is a building for the citizens of Edinburgh. We, as Filmhouse, over 90% of our audiences come from the city council boundary. Even for the International Film Festival, and folk go, well, it's attracting people from across the world. Well, it does, but it's actually over 70% of the people who come to the festival are from the city of Edinburgh, and it's 85% come from Scotland. So it's very much a space for the citizens of Edinburgh in terms of watching film. But then when you get on to looking about learning about film, we have 10,000 school kids coming through the door each year, and we want to increase that massively because we're wanting to inspire that next generation of filmmakers, film watchers, film learners. And we need a space that's appropriate to do that, that is inspirational. Third and final point briefly is this is a consultation. And we are very keen to get people's feedback about what they think about the exterior as well as the interior. And as I've said and Richard said before, the designs continue to adapt. And as we then take on board all the comments that have been made through this consultation process, we will then represent, not the compromise, but represent where we've got to in our thinking and how we can address some of those points, or maybe just explain in more detail some of them as well.
Thanks, Ken. Sheena's shared another question with us, and this one's one after my own heart, to be honest. I wanted reassurance that the seating layout in the new cinemas will be suitably raked and staggered. Being small, I often have a big person in front of me, making it difficult to see the screen. This is a particular issue with subtitles. You end up missing bits or dodging back and forth, which must be annoying for those behind.
Yes, is the answer. Shorter folk have issues in seeing in front of the person in front of them. I have problems just fitting my legs in. The existing cinema seats in Filmhouse don't work very well, I don't think, for anybody. And the raking is far too shallow. And as I said before, what we were looking to do is how to, if we're trying to fix the existing Filmhouse, we recognise the rake needs to be steeper, but then that poses all kinds of problems elsewhere. With this, we've both taken our own expertise, so we've got however many centuries worth of experience working behind the scenes in the Filmhouse, but also taken professional expertise as well in making sure that the cinemas aren't just they tick the boxes in terms of design, but they are the best design in terms of raking, in terms of seat widths, in terms of legroom. We're not looking to have reclining seats, we want proper seats, but just ones that work for everybody. And then the other bit about inclusion and access is that all the cinemas are accessed either from the rear or in the middle of the screen. So at the moment, Filmhouse Cinema 2, you come in at the rear, you have to go up steps to get in, to then go down steps. Cinema 3, you come in at the rear, that's good, but it's a very, very small screen. And Cinema 1, you come in the middle, unless you're a wheelchair user, in which case you come in at the front into the sort of 2 or occasionally 3, if you sort of squeeze it, wheelchair spaces. Everybody will be coming in either the middle or the rear of the screens. And so wheelchair user spaces will be at the rear or middle of the screens. But also, if we need access, wheelchair access at the front of the screen, so for example, a wheelchair using filmmaker who we want to allow to introduce their film, then there'll be access at the front of the screens as well. So that bit about all the levels will be fully accessible, and all parts of the screen fully accessible for everybody, however tall, small, wide, and whatever your mobility issues are.
Great, thank you. Now I've got one more question sent in advance. So just a reminder to people that you can, oh, an instant question appears in the box. We have got 14 minutes left, so I think time to take a couple more. So I'll just refer to the one that came in advance, and this is an idea as much as a question from Jonathan Finn. Is there any chance traffic could be sent through a tunnel under the existing Lothian Road so that Festival Square could extend to the Usher Hall, meaning pedestrians do not need to walk or do not need to cross a road to walk from the Usher Hall to the new Filmhouse?
That would be fantastic. Yes, please. I think in fairness to the council, they've just last year published their city centre transformation strategy, which included not building a tunnel under Lothian Road, but looking at how they can reduce the volume of traffic on Lothian Road. So by narrowing it, potentially having a tree-lined avenue, reducing the access primarily to buses and cyclists and taxis. But absolutely what we've been arguing for some time is that notion of the greater Festival Square, that the Festival Square incorporates the Lyceum, the Traverse, the Usher Hall, as well as Capitol House, the Sheraton, Exchange Plaza, and the new Filmhouse. And really simple thing, Richard said that we've aligned the front door of the proposed new building with the front door of the Usher Hall. It would be great, if absolutely nothing else, that there was a really wide crossing put in front there, so that at key times, actually the traffic, even if it's still allowed at other times, can just be stopped, and you can have that free flow of people backwards and forwards.
That sounds great. We've got a question in live from Jenny, who asks, will there still be a 35mm projection capability?
16mm, 35mm, 70mm, yes. So although we're looking at doubling the number of screens, we will retain all the kit that we currently have, and we will deploy it in the screens in the new venue. It is part of what makes us special and different. I'm really sad that we're closed at the moment, because you've obviously got the release of Tenet potentially at the end of July, and we would have been looking to show that on 70mm. Obviously, Christopher Nolan loves film and makes his films on real film. And we're one of the few cinemas left anywhere in the UK that can show 70mm, and absolutely that will be one of the key things for the new venue.
Brilliant. I'm going to give people just a moment to get any final questions in, and in the meantime we'll have a quick poll. So, having heard more about the plans, do you think you're more likely to spend more time in Festival Square if the new Filmhouse is in it? Some answers coming in. Okay, I think that's us. So it's what we've been waiting for. It's 100% yes. So that's great news. Okay, we don't have any more questions to answer at the moment. Ken or Richard or Fraser, is there anything you'd like to say in wrapping up?
I think just from my side, Filmhouse as a development, as a building, has been over 40 years worth of compromises. And every time from the very beginning they've tried to fix one thing, it's had this whole series of knock-on impacts somewhere else. And we've reached the end of the line. It is DDA compliant, but just. We want a building that is fully DDA compliant, that embraces it at the beginning. Simple things like there is no lift access to the offices. We have offices above Cinema 3 at the rear of the building. We're entirely reliant on our staff having full mobility and being able to get up and down flights of stairs a lot during the day. The toilet facilities, we're aware, completely inadequate, but the compromise is, well, if you had them bigger, you have less space to do the things you actually want to do. So all of those compromises have led to a building that we are fully aware has a huge amount of affection for it. I've been going to Filmhouse myself since the mid-1980s. I've had the real privilege and honour of running it since 2011, but it therefore means I know probably better than most the complete impossibility of trying to fix the existing building. But Filmhouse is way more than a building. It is, as I said before, it's the ethos and values of what makes it special. It's the people who work there. It's how we show films. It's the fact that we believe in that choice of film, that diversity of film, and that diversity of audience. And those are the things that are compromised as well, is that we can't show as many films as we want to. We can't reach as many people as we want to. And we can't do all the community engagement, all the film education, all the wider range of activities that we really want to, because we don't have the space or facilities in a box. And what we're proposing, it's still a box, but it's a box that's actually designed for us, rather than designed for a bunch of churchgoers 190 years ago.
Thank you, Ken. Fraser or Richard, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, yes, I'll add a couple of things really. First of all, this is not just making a larger version of what we have at the moment. It's a quantum leap in ambition, both in terms of what a Filmhouse might be, but also in terms of what Edinburgh might have. You know, Edinburgh's done rather well in many ways over the centuries in having, for a population size which is relatively modest, it has a series of very significant public buildings. And this is going to be in that tradition. We want it to be a building which is loved by the people of Edinburgh and visited many times by them, but also is known far beyond Edinburgh, and that when visitors come to Edinburgh, they will want to come and look at the new Filmhouse. And I think that's very exciting in the way that when you go to Glasgow, you want to go to the Burrell Gallery or whatever have you, because you've heard about it and you've seen it. So it's going to become a destination for both Edinburgh people and people from down south, because there's nothing like this in London, there's nothing like this in Glasgow, and it will take its place in a sort of select band of very interesting cinema buildings throughout the world. Ken's mentioned the Amsterdam Eye, for example, and there are one or two others. So this is really putting us on the map architecturally in terms of what you can make a cinema be in the city as a civic monument. I think the other thing to say is that, you know, arts buildings generally have changed their nature over the last 50 years, and for the better in many ways. They've become much more inclusive. I mean, I always like to tell the story when I was a little boy in Stockport. You know, my dad would take me to see an exhibition. If there was time, he would have a cup of tea on the way out. And 50 years later, you know, if you go to DCA in Dundee, which has been mentioned, you go there for the cup of tea, and if you have time, you go to the exhibition. Now that's a slightly extreme and slightly amusing way of putting it, but I think they have arts buildings have become much more meeting places and social places, and I think that's good because it gets people over the threshold, regardless of what their intentions are to do in the building. But once you've got them over the threshold in the building, then you can tempt them into the real business of the building, which is seeing film or discussing film, or whatever have you. So I'm hoping that this building, by attracting a lot more people into it, will in itself vastly increase the cinema going public and looking at the sort of films that Filmhouse can offer, which is an amazing menu of films, absolutely fantastic. And that's what it's all about, really, it seems to me, is so those are those two objectives, which are both of them extremely ambitious, and that's what I'm nailing my colours to the mast about.
Super, thank you, Richard. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning and for sending in your questions and asking questions live. I hope it's been useful. If you've not filled in the survey yet, please do. The consultation remains open until the 12th of July. And if you know others that may want to attend this afternoon session at 4 o'clock or fill in the survey, please point them in that direction. There's a lot on the website if they don't have a chance to join us this afternoon. I think that's it from us. Thank you very much. Have a great day.